evening, everyone. Hello, my name is Isabel Briggs, and I am the Arts and Culture Program Coordinator here at LA County Library. Tonight, I am very honored to be introducing you all to our speakers. Leading our conversation is, you know her, LA County Librarian, Dr. Skye Patrick. Skye Patrick was appointed to her role in 2016. She is responsible for the library's 86 library locations, 15 vehicle mobile fleet, and our resources that are used by more than 3.4 million customers across LA County. From the beginning of her tenure, Skye has prioritized community engagement through visioning sessions, inviting the public to share their ideas for local libraries. Her mission has been to break down barriers and expand access by developing programs that meet the needs of LA County's diverse communities. Under Skye's leadership, LA County Library has received the 2023 National Medal for Museum and Library Service, the nation's highest honor given to museums and libraries. She is also a recipient of the 2025 James Irvine Leadership Award, which recognizes leaders whose innovative solutions to critical state challenges improve people's lives, create opportunity, and contribute to a better California. Skye remains dedicated to reinforcing the library's role as a hub for information, literacy, civic engagement, and belonging. Tonight, Skye will be interviewing Casey Johnston. Casey Johnston is a best-selling author, writer, and cultural critic. Her work covers the intersections of a diverse range of topics, including politics, identity, health, technology, power, womanhood, and embodiment, and has earned critical acclaim from numerous outlets. Casey grew up in the Adirondacks and received her Bachelor's of Science in Applied Physics from Columbia University Engineering School. She has worked in media for 15 years as a senior tech, science, and health editor at The Outline, a senior health and tech editor at the New York Times Wirecutter, and as the culture editor at Ars Technica. Most recently, she was the editorial director of health and lifestyle coverage at Vice. In 2016, Casey started a science-based column about strength called Ask a Swole Woman, which now lives within her newsletter, She's a Beast. In December 2021, she published Lift Off, Couch to Barbell, a book and training program for total lifting beginners who want to feel stronger and build a more meaningful, functional relationship with their bodies. Casey's newest book, A Physical Education, is a journalistic exploration of the wide-ranging history, science, and psychology of strength, braided with her personal story of learning to lift weights. She loves lifting, watching TV, playing video games, eating interesting snacks, and inadvisably unphotogenic meals. She hangs out the most with her husband and their son, her two black cats, Fletch and Gert, and her dog, Luca. Thank you both for being here tonight. And Skye, I will turn it over to you now.
I'm going to go ahead and start. First of all, let me welcome you, Casey.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Oh my God. You're a celebrity to me, this intro. I'm like the LA Library. I can't tell you how many books are in my house right now from the library.
Well, we're gonna chop it up, Casey. We're gonna get into all of that. But before we get started, as most of you know, it is customary for Los Angeles County to read our land acknowledgement. So I'll start there. The County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land originally and inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Taktaviam, Serrano, Quiche, and Chumash people. We honor and pay respects to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these waters and lands. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizures, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, and reconciliation, and to elevating the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands. We are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments, including, and in no particular order, the Fernandino-Toctavian Band of Mission Indians, the Gabrielino Tongva Indians of California Tribal Council, the Gabrielino Tongva San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, and the Fernandino Band of Mission Indians. We are so excited for this conversation. You are our first guest after a short little hiatus for the summer. And I was thrilled that we were able to get you to come and talk to us about weightlifting and in a female body and apparently a mother. So let's get into it. So I'm going to start. And as most people know, I tend to kind of go off script and come back. And I really like it to be conversational. So let's go with that.
Sure.
I'm going to start to ask you a question about your book, Physical Education. And I want you to talk to the audience here, the participants, about how you transitioned from a life of distance running to weightlifting. I don't know those two things to be compatible. They seem to be very different. As someone who's recently learning how to run herself and who is recently learning to lift, can you kind of walk us through that journey? Like what happened to make that transition for you?
Yeah, I mean, I do think you don't maybe hear of people going from one to the other so much. Usually they get into one and like, that's enough for one lifetime. But I never really liked running. I got into it because I felt like I had to do cardio and burn calories and lose weight. I was feeling a lot of pressure to lose weight, just like in the ether. I felt like it was my solemn duty to always be losing weight, to always be concerned about how my body looked in that respect. So running was one of my least favorite things to do. But when I sort of looked up exercises and how many calories they burned, running was like one of the calorie burningest activities. So I just buckled down and started running. And then I never kind of quite got what I wanted out of it. I was running more and more, eating less and less. And I felt like I was never at a point where I could just sort of stop thinking about all of this quite so much. And then I came across this post online that had gone viral. And this was back in 2014, or the post was from 2012, really, but I had stumbled upon it in 2013, I think, initially. It was a woman talking about how she was getting into lifting weights. She was working out half as much as I was and eating twice as much food, and she was having a great time. And she posted before and after pictures where she like looked more toned, as we would have said in those days, but she hadn't lost her body weight, had stayed the same, she attested. So I was not aware that any of this was like possible, that all of these pieces could fit together this way. She wasn't doing any cardio. So for somebody who is interested in that kind of body change, but had no idea about how to do any of this stuff, I think I had been to the very bitter end of running and I was ready to try anything basically that might work. So
that's right. That's right. That's an interesting take on it, because I think you're touching on something that I think is really intrinsic to the female person's experience on the planet, which is you must always be working out. You must always be considering what your body looks like and how people are receiving your body. Mm-hmm. I think, in all fairness, I think that there's some of that for male-bodied people to be swole, I guess is how you would say it. But I think women really have that additional pressure to look a certain way, and certainly not necessarily muscular, which I'm going to get into that question a little bit later. So you write about how our bodies are so deeply interconnected within themselves, like the bones, the tendons, the muscles, all working together, and the ways that different muscles play back and forth with each other to produce a specific movement. How did you learn the interior of your body and how it affects the change that you interact with the exterior of yourself? And so what I mean by that is that there is clearly an interconnectivity. How did you figure out how those two things work in unison? Maybe is a better way of saying that.
Yeah, there was a component of reading about how lifting worked, which part of the beauty of this post that I found was it led into this subreddit where they cataloged like tons of resources of how to get into lifting. So first I read a book, and then I think I read another book, and it went from there. But I watched videos, and so I learned about this style of lifting where the goal was to lift free weights, meaning not weight machines like most of what's in the gym, and to do what are called compound movements. Compound being it uses more than one joint of your body at a time. So like your hips and your knees, or your shoulders and your elbows. So I had always thought of my body as broken down into all of these little pieces, like the way that they are by machines in the gym, where it's like you work out your quads, then you work out your hamstrings, then you work out your calves, and then you work out your biceps, and then your triceps. And it's like, it would be understandable to think like, oh, you would need to be in the gym for like several hours in order to like get a full workout.
Exactly.
So I had never heard of this style of working out where you do multiple muscles at once, or I had no idea how this was supposed to work. But then when I had it sort of laid out for me in this way, where it's like, this can actually make things a lot simpler. And it's so much closer to how your body actually works, where it's like when you pick something up, you're not moving your bicep, then your tricep, then your delt, and then your like fingers, and then your quads, and then your hand, whatever, like you bend down with all of the muscles that it takes to bend down, and then you stand up with all the muscles it takes to stand up. So it makes sense to train them in basically as holistic a way as possible. And that involves not just the muscles, but they need to be able to coordinate with each other. And that happens, especially when you're new to lifting, as much in your nervous system as it does in the muscles themselves, because the muscles are learning to fire together. And that is like so much of your strength. I mean, even people who are really, really strong will tell you that you can continue to make gains your whole life just by becoming more efficient, basically, at how you use your muscles together. And that's like a skill you can build over your lifetime. You gain a lot really quickly in the beginning, but it's like a easy to learn, hard to master kind of thing.
No, I appreciate that. So as someone who hates the gym, that would be me, and I dislike the experience based on what I'm about to ask you. So there's a type of person, not to stereotype, but there is a type of person who very much is involved, embedded in the gym culture, trying to tiptoe around that. And I think a lot of people feel out of place, or maybe they don't feel like there is a place for them. And so what you have seen, I think, there are certain gyms that market themselves like the gym of the people, or gym for women, or, whatever the case may be, I think to try to minimize or mitigate that feeling of othering as you go into the gym. And what I'm alluding to is this sort of idea of the weightlifting bros, right? And bros could be a female too, because I see them there as well. You mentioned in your book that you were afraid of the perception, or people watching, and people thinking that, or you thinking that people think you're doing something wrong. And then I just wanted, to talk about like how that alienation, did it prevent you from starting earlier or maintaining? Like, what did you do to get over the bro culture at the gym? I mean, I'm just going to ask very honestly, because I don't like it. It's not comfortable personally.
Yes, I completely understand. And that's like a big part of the first big chunk of my book, is like, I wanted these things that lifting could offer me, but if I had been able to feel comfortable in a gym, I might have been doing all of that stuff already, but I just associated this activity not with like any real life experience I had in the gym, but just like a certain stereotype of person. Like, I think up until that point in my life, I would have been like, why would I risk the sort of interactions that I feel sure I will have, where I'll be harassed or leered at, or like, things that would make me really uncomfortable just so I can lift weights. It was like, didn't make sense. But once I sort of had a more concrete idea of what I wanted out of it, I think you could look at it as a combination of my whole life had taken me that long to get comfortable with that idea, but then also I was moved enough by the theoretical possibilities of what lifting offered me that I was able to make that leap. And then I think once I started to get into it, there's always a thing of like the first time you go anywhere, it's going to be uncomfortable. When you start a new school or a new job, it's just like,
right,
it's no fun, but there's only one first time, and every time after that will be a little easier. But I think once I sort of started to feel more the effects of lifting and get the actual experience of it, that snowballed into its own motivation beyond what I might encounter in the gym. And then what I did actually find when I got into the gym was that the vast majority of the people were very nice and just like really liked working out, were like enthusiastic about it and wanted to share that with me and anybody and bring people in. Like they're there because they really like lifting and they spend a lot of time doing it. And they were not, by and large, there's jerks everywhere, but I was pleasantly surprised how welcoming and sort of earnest and genuine they were.
You mentioned something in your last response, and I want you to kind of tease this out because I think us commoners hear this a lot about free weights versus machine weights. Can you just talk a little bit about what your experience is and why free weights versus the machines? Because everywhere you go, all the hotels, everything, they have all the machines and they have some free weights, but certainly not as much. So if free weights are better for you, why do you see so many machines? Maybe it's a great way to ask.
That's a good question. I mean, I think there's a lot of factors, but some of them are machines look fancy. They justify a high gym membership fee. Yeah. They sort of have a lower intimidation factor where you can just sort of get in and feel like you're doing something. It's not really about like what's effective. The gym is not, I mean, you have to think about the fact that like the gym is not really, most gyms are not in the business of like helping people be healthy or get stronger or whatever. They're in the business of collecting their membership fees. And that's it. Ideally, you don't even show up. And when you do,
such a bit of truth there.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's why I'm kind of like the best gym is a gym that looks kind of well loved. Like it's, not bright and shiny and new. It's a gym where people use it. They get a lot of use out of it. The machines, I think those are probably the two biggest factors and why there are so many machines. But you will always find in a hotel gym a set of dumbbells, and that's where you want to be living, really.
And can you just speak a little bit about what the difference is in the workout quality versus the machines versus free weights? Like what is it that us normal people should be thinking about?
Yeah. So the thing about machines is that for the most part, they tend to be more single joint movements, which are not as functional as I was talking about earlier. And then there's also the factor of, for the most part, they're moving your limbs on almost like a hydraulic track. They're stabilizing the weight for you. And so much of our strength is not about like, am I working this one big muscle, 3 sets of 10 reps, but like, can I support the weight? In real life, you're not moving things on a stabilized track. You have to hold them and you have to, you're holding your cat litter box and it's like, it's going to tip you over no matter how many reps of like the overhead press machine you can do. So it's all about not even the big muscles, but the tiny muscles and that building that skill of coordination, which you're doing anytime you pick something up, like just the sort of spontaneous stabilizations you have to do. Holding on to a free weight is like part of the strength that you're building.
You talked a bit about free weights versus machines. What about free weights versus something like like calisthenics? Any thoughts there?
Calisthenics are just a different thing. They're more what we would call probably a power movement. Some endurance movement, I'm imagining like you're doing jumping jacks or burpees. That's more kind of anaerobic training. I mean, it's not bad for you, but it's not going to build muscle progressively. It'll like, if you've never done it before, in the process of getting good at it, you're going to build a little bit of muscle, but only enough to like do a burpee. If you want to like build strength, you need to be able to like add weight reliably to the movement that you're doing. And most calisthenic movements are not really like designed to have weight added to them. They're not designed to do for like these sets of lower reps for the most part that will make building strength more straightforward. But they have their own skill set that they build. It's just not strength in the intensity sense.
Yeah, sorry, I'll get back on track here. I'll just say that I am the president of I Hate Burpees club. That would be my other title.
I never do burpees, so I'm right there with you. I think I've maybe done 2 of them in my life and been like,
oh, they're cruel and
absolutely
unusual.
not.
I'm just never a fan. Okay, let me get back to my questions here. So one of the most interesting things that you write about is about how our cultural consumption and stereotypes about strong or muscled people. So weightlifting, as we know it, and as you write about, was brought to America by a group of German immigrants known as the Turners. And their intentions were so rooted in the community and what might be called mutual aid, essentially. Can you talk a little bit about the Turners, who they were, and how we got from them to today?
Yes. So the Turners were originally a movement in Germany around the time of Napoleon, basically. There was one guy who set up what was called the Turnplatz in Germany. There's a lot of gymnastics, but there was also use of weights, and it was also sort of a German cultural center. They would sing German songs in a time when like Germany was not doing so hot, sort of like as far as international relations, it was getting stepped on a lot. So I think he was trying to kind of keep things together. As more Germans migrated to America, emigrated, some of them were Turners. They set up what were called Turner Halls, which were kind of like YMCAs. But at the time, there were a lot of them. I think I had a statistic in the book that was like, at one point, there were more Turner Halls in St. Louis than there are like combined YMCA's, Planet Fitnesses, and CrossFits today. Like, so there were a lot of them, and St. Louis was smaller then. So it's like they were pretty dominant, and they were very socialistically minded. They were not about competition. They sort of abhorred the developing American culture toward elitism and competitiveness. They were more about raising the floor for public health. Basically.
Okay.
They were great. I mean, a fact that I learned recently that if I had learned it earlier, I would have put it in the book, but Joseph Pilates, who invented Pilates, learned everything he knew from the Turners.
Interesting. Yes. Okay. It makes me think of, and I know that these are completely different kind of practices, but a factoid about the Pilates person, Joseph Pilates, and gyrotonics. There's some sort of cross-pollination that I'll try to remember. So the Turners is not like a last name. It was a movement. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, I would more describe it as the movement, the collective of people.
Okay. I find that really interesting. Before I move on to my next question, I want to jump into the chat here and answer some of these questions, because this is a great one, because I've wondered this myself. What are your thoughts on taking creatine? I am a 64-year-old woman and who wants to get stronger and build more muscle. Well, I'm not exactly 64, but I also have that same question. And I see these influencers, some of them swear by it. Is that your cat?
That's my cat. Sorry.
Some people swear by it, these influencers. And then I also have read in other places that creatine will really make you gain weight and not necessarily muscle if you're not using it right. What are your thoughts on that?
So creatine is basically the mechanism for it is it's like I've had people think it's a steroid. It's not a steroid. It's a supplement that will basically help your muscles hold on to more energy in the form of water and glycogen are the two basic like pieces of fuel. So when you go to the gym, you'll sort of have more energy to do more reps at a time, more movements. You won't get worn out as quickly. Maybe like you can go for an hour instead of, 30 or 40 minutes was what I would find. Some people initially it makes them feel like a little bit more bloated in the first like maybe week or two that you're taking it. That tends to settle out. Like it's not a big deal, or like you would think of it as like it's like water weight. I mean, you're not gaining 5 pounds or whatever it might be permanently. But should you take it, I think it's the kind of thing where it's so much more important that you make it to the gym consistently, however many times you go, 2, 3, 4 times a week, that you get all your movements done, that you're eating your food, that you're sleeping well. Those things matter so much more than any supplement, except maybe like protein powder will help you sort of get those big building blocks. If you have that all sorted out and you're like, what's the next step I can take? Creatine is a good next step, because it will, especially if you are trying to bulk, for instance, and you're setting about a workout routine that is slightly longer and more complex, creatine can help you not feel as tired by the end of it, really. And there's like not really any downside to taking it. I mean, you take 5 grams for most normal people per day is a normal amount. That's not very much. You can buy like a generic form of it. You don't need a specialized. I think maybe they make like creatine hydrolysate now. It's like, you don't really need that. It's for anyone. You don't need to be like 25 and a young man to take it. Anyone can take it. It's like, it's okay. I mean, please don't sue me if like something happens while you're taking it, but like it's a very safe, like
just a conversation.
Yeah. This is for educational purposes only. Talk to your doctor before you do anything in the gym.
All of that.
Ever.
Yes.
But just generally speaking, creatine's a very normal thing to take for
people
all ages.
So she's a woman who's looking to get stronger, build muscle. You said bulking. So I see those two things as different. Bulking, I interpret that as like, my wife's brother, who's a bodybuilder, he like bulks and he gets super big for competition. I could be wrong, but I don't think this woman is looking for that.
Yeah. You don't know. So you don't need to bulk in order to take creatine. You don't need to bulk. I mean, like, so just to define my terms, bulking would be when you have maybe gotten all you can out of eating enough to maintain your weight while you're building strength. And now you want to deliberately gain weight, which will allow you to gain some more muscle and you'll gain some body fat along with it. And you do that for like 3 months, 6 months. That's what bulking is. Okay. And then typically after you're done bulking, you start the process of cutting, where you hang on to the muscle and you're trying to slowly lose the body fat that you gained during the bulk. So you end up with like a little bit more muscle, slightly higher body weight, but your body composition has changed a little bit.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Another question in the chat before I get back to mine. I'm 59 years old. Can you talk about how small weight mechanics work better long-term, and how often should I be lifting?
Small weights mechanics. I'm not quite sure what is meant by that. If I were to guess, your idea is that you should use smaller weights in the long term. I wouldn't say that that's a given by any stretch. And if anything, I mean, my whole thing, you might say, is to encourage people to use heavier weights than they think they should. That doesn't mean you walk right up to a 50-pound dumbbell and try to pick it up. You start where you're able. And then the whole design of the strength training that I do is you start where you're able, you add a few pounds every time you go to the gym to each lift that you're doing. So you might start with squatting 5 pounds. Next time you go, you squat 10 pounds. Over the course of a few weeks, eventually you're squatting 40 pounds. I think a lot of people are not aware of how straightforward that process can be, regardless of your background, regardless of your age. There's been a real misunderstanding up until recently, thinking that when people get older, they just lose muscle. And that's just like the fate of every person who gets older. And that's not true. Those things are not one-to-one. We've seen many, many people at this point take up strength training when they're 70, 80, 90 years old, 100 years old. I think there have been some women deadlifting, potentially a 100-year-old woman deadlifting her body or her age, if I remember correctly.
Wow.
This is not a accomplished fact of getting older. The body is very, very good at building muscle and retaining strength if the conditions are met. And the conditions are not something crazy like you need to spend 5 hours a day in the gym. We're talking about like 30 minutes, 3 times a week.
40 minutes. Yeah. That's an interesting point that you make, because I think, again, a lot of women have been told, you don't want to get big, and so therefore you want to have lean muscle. But what I hear you saying is that you do need to continue to add weight, whatever wherever your point of entry is, even if it's just a little bit iteratively to begin building out your strength, right? Rather than just attempting lean muscle, whatever that means exactly.
Yes. Heavier, increasingly heavy weights, fewer reps is a much more straightforward way of gaining strength than smaller weights, more reps, more complicated movements, that kind of thing.
Okay, so we all know the benefits of exercising, that it's good for our bodies, it's good for our minds, it helps us live longer and enjoy life longer. And we all know that we should exercise, and probably more of us should do it now. I think probably more than we are doing now, I should say. So what is the most unexpected benefit of becoming a strong woman?
That's a good question. I think the biggest thing for me has been that my whole life, I was sort of like very not in tune with my feelings, with my experience of life. I thought everything was just kind of about like bearing everything, like bearing the weight, and like sort of not even gracefully per se, but just that like how tough you were was a matter of how much you could take, basically. And but lifting weights backed me into this process of like that I wasn't even aware of, but the atomic unit of lifting weights is that you're doing a rep and you're doing a set, or doing your movements and asking yourself, how did that feel? Was that too light? Was that too heavy? Did my form feel okay, or did I feel off balance? Just sort of this like consistent practice of indexing how I felt that I had never done before in anything. It meant in my whole life, it had been about like pushing everything down. Even with running, it was just sort of like push down, like you're pushing through the pain is like almost a maxim of running culture. And lifting was more about paying attention to what my experience of this was, when my experience had never been important to anything. It was just sort of like, here you go. Like, you got to do this now. So that kind of became I think really changed how I thought about life in general.
That's
where
right.
Not even like
being present.
Yeah. Not with any intention, but just it cultivated this practice of self-inquiry that carried out into my life of like, how do I feel about where I work? How do I feel about this relationship? Not even in like a really conscious way, but just encouraging me to attune to how I felt. And that was completely game changing.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I love hearing that, because I also have had a sort of I don't want to say an aha, but an awakening in this experience. And so, which would lead me into my next question. So, there are people who are listening to this and who listen to you weekly or monthly, and they say, oh, I love this for her. I love that she's doing this. I wish I could do that. Or I can't imagine myself doing that. I don't have this. I'm not flexible. This whole bit going down the rabbit hole of how you can't rather than how you can. So what would you say to those people who really do want to create an exercise regime or get fit or get better and become more of a gym person, how do you get, I think I know the answer, but what gets one foot in front of the other, in your opinion?
It's very tough. And I think, the first thing I sort of say is like, if you feel like you don't have time or you don't have the resources, you can be right, like I'm not here to tell somebody that like you must have the time, and if you don't, you just don't care enough. Like I think that's very possible. And I'm not here to argue with you. I think it's important to recognize like you have the option of not doing this if this is really not what you want. If it is what you want, the thing that I tell people is that I think if you're doing the reason that I liked strength training was that it made such a difference in how I felt every day. And I felt that difference pretty quickly. And I think that's the payoff that I really encourage people to focus on. It's like, this is why like weight loss and diet culture are so toxic in part, is because like those results are very diffuse and finicky, and most people, they're very difficult. They can take a really long time. But there's more research coming out that the health impact of exercise and a sort of basically balanced diet persists regardless of how it changes your body weight. You can be positively affected by this stuff, and you don't need to lose weight in order to do it.
Casey, I'm going to have to run that back. You're going to have to run that back. This is so important.
Yeah.
So the difference between being healthy and building muscle and perhaps not losing weight. Let's talk about that part.
Yeah.
That one I think is a big one for a lot of us.
Yes, there's a specific study that I've ended up citing a lot where it's focused actually on mortality. We could leave aside the quality of life aspect of it, which I think many people would already agree is like a positive, noticeable impact on, you exercise, your quality of life improves. You have a balanced diet, your quality of life improves. But yes, the impact of these lifestyle factors of, I think the big four in this study are: don't smoke. If you don't smoke, you don't drink, you have a basically balanced diet, you sort of like meet the minimum physical activity markers. The mortality levels between people who are underweight, overweight, class 1 and 2 obese, almost completely vanishes. The sort of background that I come from, the belief was like, there's no point in doing any of this if it's not about losing weight. The opposite is true, where it's like, we've lost the thread entirely. It doesn't matter how much you weigh. You get all of the positive impact, more in a lot of cases, when you are overweight and you remain overweight. That doesn't matter. What matters is what you do in your daily life.
And I'm not even going to open the can about worms about BMI. That'll be our conversation for another time. I want to ask a couple more of these questions because I think these are really relevant. So here's another one. I am 58 and I have been an athlete all my life. I'm experiencing menopause belly budge. Is the diet the primary focus to reduce inflammation, or is it hormone level, or what's the focus, or a combination of the various other factors?
I will say I'm not an expert in this and the effects of menopause. I will say hormone levels, that's a difficult, like even if it is the hormone levels, it's like what you do with your hormones, I think should be a reflection of like your quality of life and your health, and not necessarily your belly bulge. I mean, if you supplement hormones, I think that's a consideration with your doctor. I'm not even sure
what about just inflammation, like the body and
I'm not sure that it's inflammation per se. I mean, I think it's more a factor of like how your body holds mass as you get older, and that does change. And that is not to say that it's not possible to like get down to a low enough body fat percentage that like all of the shape goes away. But like people you can't really spot reduce body fat is a thing that's universally true. Even if you lose a lot of weight, your body sort of tends to stay the same shape. And that's a thing that I think a lot of people realize after a lot of
it
hard work.
requires the recomposition of the body. That's when it changes, eh?
Yeah, that can change the shape somewhat. But I think, I mean, if you've been an athlete all your life, you're probably doing everything that is like possible to mitigate any kind of belly bulge, as far as I'm aware. I don't think it's an inflammation thing, and I don't think it's a hormone thing. I think it's just how bodies hold their mass as you continue to change and get older. I mean, your body, we sort of go through like multiple adolescences, if you will. But I think we're starting to gain more awareness of this. And that's like more like what menopause is than any of the other factors that she mentioned.
Casey, can you speak a little bit about muscle recovery? I've heard this one too a lot. Is it healthy to do some level of exercise every day? I picked up a row machine and I've been trying to do 5 kilometers a day. And after reading your book, I wasn't sure if that was wise.
Cardio is pretty different than lifting weights. In the book, I talk a lot about the importance of rest, specifically in muscle recovery. That's when the muscles are built. Your body is taking all of the nutrients that it's getting and literally rebuilding the tissue a little bit better than it was before, so that the next time you go into the gym, you can lift slightly more weight. But with cardio, the same type of muscle damage is not happening. It's more like the muscle is getting worn out. It's just like sort of being exhausted of all of its energy stores, more so than it's being damaged. That's why it's possible to like kind of, I mean, there are people who run 20 miles every single day. If you're habituated to that, it's like, would I spend my time that way? No. Can everybody do that? No. But some people can, and it's fine. So it's like, if you enjoy that and your body feels good doing it, there's nothing wrong with it. It might help you. It might help you to, rather than rest, just think about it more in terms of cross training, because even people who like say can run really fast, really far, often have like significant mechanical issues from a lack of cross training, from like not lifting weights, from not being strong, from not like taking care of their body mobility. So it's more important, I think, to think about like the well-roundedness of your routine more than like, am I doing too much cardio per se? Because I mean, you can do whatever you want, and if it's working for you, it's working for you. But too much of one thing can over time lead to these types of like muscle imbalances, tightness. You see it a lot actually with cyclists. I think is more familiar case to anyone, that they tend to have like really tight sets of muscles and difficulty with mobility sometimes because they bike too much.
And so what I hear you saying is that it may be okay. Of course, obviously, this is not advice. I'll reiterate, but maybe if you lift one day and walk another day, lift the third day, run another day, like kind of breaking it up so that you're using different body muscles and that you're like strength training and also cardio. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah, yes, I think that is like overall less likely to lead to injury, overuse injury, or underuse injury, a more balanced program than doing the same thing many days a week.
And so speaking of injuries, I am also recently recovered from an injury. What's your advice on this? And what would you recommend, obviously speaking to your doctor, but how would you recommend someone coming back from an injury?
I would say take it easy. It's like not a rush or a contest. This is something that is part of, I think a lot of people feel like sort of shame or guilt for getting injured and for having to take a break, but it's like,
yeah,
that's being injured is like part of the whole thing. You have no idea how injured every like professional athlete is. Their whole lives are just like managing their injuries just enough that they can go out and
100%.
play the next game. Yes. So like when you get injured, it's like you're just like part of the club now, where this is like this is the game. I've learned to sort of like cherish this time of not even necessarily like I'm getting constantly injured, but like you get sick or you like go on vacation, even like you have to take some time off. It's like you're going to find yourself the longer that you're into this in a sort of constant cycle of like comeback, and that's okay. And that's like can even be useful for you to have some time to like reset, and in lifting especially, to go back down in weight, you can kind of like recheck your form, kind of straighten things out, try new things, it's a good time to like switch up your movements if you've gotten bored of what you're doing. So it's like a reset is nothing to be ashamed of, and I really encourage finding ways to like enjoy it, because I don't know, I find it enjoyable. I'm like, everything's easy again. It's sort of nice, That's how I look
like
at
hearing
it now.
that. No, I think that's a great way to look at this. I'm going to ask you just one more question. Let me just make sure I got everything in the chat. It looks like I have. One of the most resonant lines from your book, you write, the idea that if I began to want, I might never stop, was a lie that I had been told about myself for so long that it had become one of my core beliefs. If I remember correctly, you were writing about food and eating here. Two of my favorite things. But what else did this journey teach you about this concept of want or wanting, and maybe more importantly, about deserving versus earning? That one's a tough one. I want to hear about this one.
I think I did say that in context, speaking of food, but I did mean it in this sort of like more expansive way. Of the way I think about food is in many ways how I think about myself and the world and everything, which is that I am a untrustworthy person who has to be like monitored very closely, and I can't like allow myself anything in the event that once I get something that I'll just like want more and more and more and more. You could see this dynamic sort of play out in so many ways. I mean, it's like, think of workplaces where bosses are like, we can't pay people more because then, well, if they just want more and more and more money and they do less and less and less work, and it's like, things don't really play out that way. It's like, you just don't want to pay people more money.
It's a completely inverted, misguided perception.
Yes.
But yes, got you.
The fact of my wanting was the result of not giving myself like the basic amount of food, in this case, that I deserved and needed. And once I had that basic amount, I was like, I was a satiable person. Like, I'm not some uncontrollable entity. But I learned to treat myself that way, to sort of police myself. What I learned was I felt like I did have to earn everything that I did, that I had to put in so much work, when in fact there's some sort of basic amount of care and regard that I am entitled to, that I deserve as a human being. And I had I tried to tease this out in the book, how my kind of family dynamics, personal history had put me in this place of instability, where that led me to pay extra attention to diet culture, because it felt like it would give me this control. It felt like a familiar dynamic of, you work hard to earn what you will deserve if you work hard enough, rather than I'm a person who is entitled to love, acceptance, and all of these things.
That's right. That's right.
But you can't know that until you like have some basic amount. So it's very difficult to break through to that other side, was what I found. And I didn't even know what I didn't have. And again, in this way, lifting weights kind of backed me into this realization of, oh, if I give myself this basic amount, I deserve it. And it's not going to make me into some, insatiable monster.
Speaking of this, I said I had a last question, but one more comment I want to make, that one of the biggest things that I have learned in this sort of journey to self transformation, I call it a midlife transformation rather than a midlife crisis. The biggest one that was so hard for me to absorb, being a part of diet culture, being female body, being all of these things, and having the diet culture be like so pervasive, is that I had to eat more than I was eating in order to right size the weight. So coming back to that, as an example, 1,200 or 1,500 calories. The truth of the matter is that's just not enough for people to live off of, right? Not for extended periods. So that was such a change in perception I had to understand. Now, when I say eat more and more calories, I don't mean going to Burger King, although that's also fun. I mean like having quality whole foods up into the, potential 2,000 calories or something, or even beyond that, depending on what you do. That was a hard one for me to absorb because I was not what I was taught. Right. So do you have a comment on that? Did you also have to flip that and understand that you needed more food, and if you're going to be lifting,
yes,
you needed to feed the muscle?
I was completely in that place of like, I eat 1,500 calories a day, and if I eat more than that, I gain weight. And it made me very afraid to eat more food, not realizing that the reason that I gained weight was in part just like a fluctuation of your body sort of, when it's been deprived for a long time, retains more carbs and water as a reaction to eating more food. And that's not like real body weight gained. That's like your body's kind of trying to come out of survival mode. I didn't trust that I could eat 2,000 plus calories a day and not gain weight until I tried it, and
so you learned how to eat
in conjunction with lifting, and found out that, my like things sort of evened out after a little bit as far as the like weight fluctuations. Part of it is like your body becomes habituated to 1,500 calories, 1,200 calories. That doesn't mean you're doing well on you're sort of surviving, not thriving on that amount of calories.
Absolutely.
And it's very difficult to get many people. I mean, there's a part in the book where I'm sort of trying to break through to my mother on this point of like, this is sort of a mirage that you need to stick to this number of calories in order to like maintain your body weight. But I mean, I try and encourage as many people as I can to try eating more consistently for a longer period of time, especially if you've been trying to survive on this like meager allotment, and notice how you feel more so than the scale weight.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Well, Casey, it's been a pleasure having you here. So her book is called Lift Off, the couch to the barbell. I love that. She also has a newsletter. She is a beast, and Ask a Swole Woman, a column. So thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. We'll actually have to have you back maybe next year. Tell us.
Oh my God, I would love to.
Yeah, I think we could continue this conversation into the night. I think there's so many layers. So we'll definitely have to have another time.
Yes, totally. I would love to. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks everyone for joining us. We'll see you soon. Take good care.